Spirit World issue 1, Alyssa Wong writing with Henning on the art. So this is the first of this new line of minis that we're getting as part of Asian Heritage Month.
Right.
Is that what it's called?
I just know that the kids at my school call it AAPI month. So
okay,
Asian American Pacific Islander, I believe, is the
okay. That's what the rest of it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So we obviously all these stories were teased in the various Lazarus Planet books that were coming out a few months ago. Which actually, I think if I have a sort of objective critique, I do think it's a bit unfortunate that what happened in the tease for this, that had Batgirl, Cassandra Cain specifically.
It was essentially issue 1, right?
Yeah, that's my problem, is that what happened in that was actually so important to this that, this is an issue 1 and there's an editor's note saying, hey, back in this one shot, this thing happened. I'm like, no. If you're going to do like a little teaser and like an anthology book to set this up, it should just be like a taste of the character, but don't do any important plot beats yet. So I do think that's a problem. I think that is actively a bad choice for an issue 1.
Yep, I agree. However, that said, I really enjoyed this issue 1, right? Because there's a lot going on, but in a good way. A lot of fun mythological stuff and how it's. I'm trying to put this as respectively as possible. The way that other cultures see death and the afterlife versus the way that we've gotten it in so much media. I'm glad that in like comics here, we can see this different version, right? Of what the spirit world is, and that, who's the writer on this one again? I don't want to get her name wrong.
Alyssa Wong.
What Wong does here, through dialogue and stuff is, explain this spirit world and the offerings, and I didn't ever feel like this was just like exposition. I felt like it was part of the story. So yeah.
I'm a bit more mixed on it, but I had that one objective complaint. I wanted to get that out of the way first because I think that's just a valid complaint from a writing standpoint. But I think anything else I have a problem with here is really just a taste thing. I don't think there's I think it's a pretty solid, well put together issue. I think it sets up some of its rules. I think there's a really good bit in the issue where we're in the spirit world and there's two women just talking about stuff, and they're sort of bitching about someone else, and they talk about how she's just mad because no one's burned anything in her honor recently, right? And that's like one of the rules of the spirit world, is that when someone in the real world burns something as a tribute, you get something from it. You get the thing in the afterlife.
It appears in the spirit world, and that's how they get things.
But the rest of that scene, though, when they smell Cassandra Cain, these two women turn into like spirit monsters because they want to feed on the living person who's in the spirit world. So there's bits like that are fun, and maybe the reason why I like that the most is where it kind of turns into slightly horror, and I tend to like stuff like this when it is more horror focused than mysterious. The actual sort of more fantastical elements of it, and is it Xanthe is the name of the main character?
Is their name.
Like they and Constantine, who by the way, like I think the art's pretty solid, but I will say I didn't realize that was Constantine the first couple of panels until they said Constantine.
And you said about story stuff is taste. I think the art as well, because it's very manga-esque, and I'm not a big fan of manga style art. Like if you are great, like there's nothing technically wrong with it. It's just a taste thing. And I had a double take if that was Constantine. Had they not said it was Constantine, if they just called him John, I'd be like, oh, this is a new character.
It's more obvious as it goes on and you see him in different situations. But that first page when he's just sitting at the table and there's like a cat on his head, it's like it's not that easy to tell.
Yeah.
But it's a sort of thing where I kind of obviously knew this going in because dealing with the spirit world and stuff, I knew it might not be quite for me because it's a bit too fantasy based. Spiritual stuff isn't necessarily my thing. Like I say, when mystical stuff is more mysterious and they treat it as a horror, where it's like, oh, the fear of the unknown, and it's like soul crushingly dreadful. That I can get into that because you treat it as this like thing that we just can't understand. That's where kind of the Lovecraftian or whatever kind of cosmic horror comes into it. Like I'm not saying this can't work for me, but I feel like it's an uphill battle. Like very few things with this type of.
I'm so glad that we've done shows for as long as we have, and I can I was reading this, I was like, Pete's gonna think this is too fantastical.
Yeah,
So,
and and I love Cassandra Cain obviously, so I dig that she's a supporting character in this. But like I just I got through it, I read it, and I went, you know what, this was a perfectly fine comic, but I don't think it's for me, and that's okay. Like not everything has to be for me.
I'm invested in enough. I can probably get past the art throughout. But just, I need a little bit more from Xanthi as a character because I'm kind of confused on where they're actually from because what was her name? Popo, the grandmother character, talking about how she picks up strays.
Well, there's some important details here you're glossing over that we should probably explain. So this grandmother character, Popo, is in the spirit world, and she looked after Xanthi when Xanthi ended up in the spirit world. Now, Xanthi, of course, is back in the real world because Lazarus Planet opened up things and whatnot.
Right.
But so this grandmother character ends up with Cassandra Cain and is looking after her, gives her some magic tea that'll basically hide her living scent.
And the other character that's with Popo, and which is still a funny name to say, and Cassandra, what's his name?
Oh, you're asking now.
Is it Benton? I feel like it's Benton or something along those.
Bowen.
Bowen.
There you go.
Bowen. It feels like these are living people that have gotten stuck now in the spirit world, and that's with Xanthi. I'm not sure because reading the Lazarus Planet stuff, I thought they had, this was just like their thing. They dealt with the creatures crossing over.
Yeah, the end of the issue, like the big cliffhanger is that because the plot of the issue is that Xanthi and Constantine are trying to find a way to open the portal to the spirit world to get Cassandra back, right? And that's why her going there is in the setup like mini story is a big plot point. Feels weird it felt really weird here when it's like, hey, Cassandra's in the spirit world, this happened, and like asterisks. Check out the Lazarus. Like, I don't know. That feels like too big of a detail to not have in your issue 1. But so that's what the plot is, and they're sort of working on doing that and looking for magicians to help and whatever. And
Constantine goes to call in a favor to a necromancer.
Yeah, and they end up having a fight with the spirits, and there's a bit of lore dropped here about what these spirits are. These I can't remember the name. They
call them a collective, which seems like it's just like a melding of different kinds of spirit world creatures on the outside.
Oh yeah, but earlier on they were talking about how the spirits were showing up as
Zhangxi
or something like that.
Zhangxi, I almost said Zhanxi 3 times, which is the planet that Jon Stewart's famous for murdering.
So, yeah, but that's what the plot all is. But whilst they're doing this, and after they've had their fight and whatnot, the cliffhanger at the end is that a woman shows up and talks to Xanthi, and Xanthi's like, "Mom?" ? And that's so clearly I think issue 2, I presume, because it's going to be this conversation between Xanthi and their mother, will probably enlighten a lot of what the backstory is and how they ended up going to spirit world, how they became disconnected with their mother, and so on. Because this issue doesn't really solidify a lot of it. It just kind of hints at a couple things.
Yeah. Well, and I really like that scene too when Xanthi and Constantine go to that necromancer and they get in there, and it's like this. It looks like a hunting parlor with all of these taxidermied animals, and then this 2-headed goat, because they realize like, oh, these are creatures that are from the other side as well. And John has a comment that this necromancer is like, yeah, it's not just fine conjuring life. He wants to create it from scratch, which I think that'll pop up as well. But then one of that double goat head starts like screaming, and they get around and there's a collective there. And I thought that scene was very well paced and handled.
Yeah.
And it was a bit creepy. So I really like those aspects of it as well. In addition to the more mythological side of things. So I'm gonna stick around for at least the next issue. Plus, any character that wields a gigantic sword like that's cool by me.
I think one of the other things is like a pacing thing for me, and not that there's bad pacing in this issue, but when I talk about how it can appeal to me, some of this, because them going to this mansion where the necromancer is, and let the animals on the wall start coming to life and attacking them, and it is a very horror themed scene. But I wasn't that into it because it all happened so quickly that I didn't think there were I think for me to like that, I need some creepy scenes of them going through the building and starting to notice little signs. It needs to be a bit more grounded in how it builds up to things, Whereas this is a more fantasy based book in the sense that
Right.
it just keeps like hitting, it keeps going to 10 immediately. And
Right.
I think one of the interesting things is that this sort of like horror fantasy stuff that I do kind of like tends to be TV or low budget movies, and I think the reason is that because you can't just do what you want because you have to have a budget, it forces them to be more grounded, and I tend to
Right.
prefer that, I think, between the two. But
I mean, no, that makes sense.
it's mostly a taste thing, though. Like I say, like this book
Yeah.
is perfectly fine. I do have that one critique about a major plot point not being in issue
Yeah.
1, but other than that,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
perfectly solid.
Yeah, I mostly enjoyed this. So just again, the art is my taste thing. That but other than that, yeah, I'm glad this book can exist, and I'm glad that Cassandra Cain's involved too, because it's nice to have because I'm not a Constantine fan, so to have a familiar character pop up amongst these new ones,
Yeah.
it's always a nice touch.
Yeah, and I'm glad they are trying books like this for sure.
Mhm.
And I'm looking forward to the other ones and seeing, there's
Mhm.
4. I assume I'm going to like at least one of them, if not a
Yeah.
couple. So, what are you rating Spirit World issue 1?
I mean, this is 7.5.
Yeah. I'll still go with a 7, even though I don't really think it's for me. I can't really discount it too much, but I just know I don't really feel that impassioned to read more of it.